There might not be a better way to improve your athletic performance than performing plyometric exercises. But if you don't properly prepare your body to perform these exercises, you don't just leave your body at an increased risk of injury, but you also minimize the effect that these intensive plyometric exercises are going to have on your performance. So what I'm going to do in today's video is explain to you exactly how you can develop your plyometric exercise routine to make sure that you're properly preparing your body for the impacts and the performance-enhancing benefits of plyometric exercise. Hi guys, welcome to Stout Sport Performance. I'm Austin Stout, and in today's video I'm going to explain to you how you can develop your plyometric program. We're going to give you some specific examples of how you can take your plyometrics and advance them through a few different cycles of training as a team sport athlete. Now, before we actually give you some examples, we want to break through the reason it's so important to make sure we're moving from extensive plyometrics to intensive plyometrics. Now, the goal of plyometrics in general, we know that we're trying to improve strength transfer to sport, and there probably isn't a better way to do that than by performing sprinting or other different types of jumping and plyometric action. Now, the reason this is because we're working at tempos and velocities that are much closer to what we're going to experience in sport. Now, this doesn't mean you don't do any maximum strength work. We still need all those other different aspects to our strength training regimen. They're going to improve our explosive strength and improve our ability to perform plyometrics well. But plyometric exercise is going to have a greater transfer, a more realistic transfer of strength to our sporting performance than all of the other types of strength work that we're doing. And when we talk about here, this idea of moving from extensive to intensive plyometrics, there's two main reasons that we need to do this. When we talk about extensive plyometrics, we're talking about preparation. So we're preparing the tendons and other soft tissues within our body to deal with the high impact forces that they're going to be exposed to in the intensive plyometrics. Now, if we jump too quickly to these intensive plyometrics, we're going to run into the problem of not preparing the body properly to deal with those forces. We're going to increase our risk of injury, and truth be told, we're not going to get the performance enhancing effect that we would expect to get out of those plyometrics. So we need to make sure that we go through this phase of preparatory extensive plyometrics before we start transitioning into these intensive plyometrics. The second reason we need to go through that process of working on building our jumping and landing mechanics and also working on our ability to interact and coordinate with the ground before we move to the intensive plyometrics, where we're working on maximum outputs and short ground contact times and eccentrically overloaded jump variations, is because of neuromuscular control processes. So this is simple and complex at the same time. We're going to use these two. I got these two markers here. I already tried writing words on the board in a previous take, but the camera flipped the words around, so we're just going to stick with these lines and I'm going to explain to you what they mean. So we got here this first line, and we'll call this line a feedback loop. Okay, so underneath here we have the speed of our movement. This line here at the bottom is indicating the speed of our movement. So here, as we're moving at low speeds, we are using, for neuromuscular control, what's called this feedback loop. And what this means is that as we perform these slow motions, we're able to use proprioception and some spinal reflexes and cognitive control of our movement to make adjustments in the moment to try to move optimally. So think about doing a single leg squat at a really slow tempo. You're able to make conscious controls to the way that movement is going to be executed. And the same could be said for the landing position that we hold for a few seconds after a non-intensive extensive jump. We're able to land, check to make sure that the position is good, check to make sure that we have tension at the right points of the body, and we can make conscious adjustments within those few seconds that we might hold that isometric position as we land in an extensive jumping action. But what happens is, as we start to speed up, so as this movement speed goes up, we switch in terms of the type of neuromuscular control we have into something what would be called a feed forward loop. So as we move really fast, which we're going to be in these intensive plyometrics, we're using a system called a feed forward loop, which essentially, before we perform this movement, our brain is already sending the movement pattern in a pre-programmed fashion to the muscles of the body. So we don't have the ability to consciously control the movement in the moment because the movement is happening too fast. But there's a pre-programmed command from the brain, which is then reaching the muscles, which we're then using to perform our intensive or high-tempoed movement. So you think about sprinting, for example, it happens in the same way. Some information is sent to the muscles, they perform that, and then we might make adjustments based on the information we get from that movement. But the point is here, we have to make sure that we spend enough time training these feedback loops, so making sure we master these movement patterns at slow intensities at the extensive range of our plyometric action, so that by the time we start building to these more intensive tempos, not only is our body prepared, the tendons and soft tissues are prepared to deal with those high impact forces, but we've also developed a high quality feed forward system, meaning our natural movement patterns, the way our body is going to move at those high intensities, is more likely to be of good quality instead of less good quality due to less well-trained jumping, landing, and movement patterns. So those are going to be the two major reasons. We have this transition of neuromuscular control. We have to make sure that we're sending a highly programmed and a high quality movement pattern from the brain to those intensive movements. And the way we're going to be able to do that is by developing high quality movement patterns at these slower tempos, at these eccentric plyometric actions first. And we also have to make sure that we're prepping the tendons and soft tissues of the body to prepare with the forces we're going to impose them to. So now we're going to actually go through a certain progression that you could do over a period of weeks or a period of months or training cycles to make sure that you can accurately progress your plyometric drills. All right, guys, so we're going to go through our first phase here that we go through in our extensive plyometric progression. Now, these aren't technically plyometrics, not by at least the Russian definition of plyometric exercise, but it's still worth doing before we get, again, to those intensive plyometrics. We're just going to perform some box jumps, and this is a great way to reduce the eccentric load that we're going to put on the body as we work on trying to master good landing mechanics. Now, a lot of times what I like to have clients do is we're going to start in a nice athletic stance, a semi-squatted position. We're going to feel this tension develop in our glutes, and we're going to start with the arms and in a position ready to scoop forward as we make that jump. We're going to try to land softly, like a statue, in the exact same position that we took off from. Looking for a quick extension of the hips, and then a nice soft landing. We're only going to perform 5 repetitions, somewhere between 3 to 4 sets, and we're going to include these for a period of about 3 to 4 weeks, mastering our landing mechanics and mastering our takeoff mechanics on 2 legs. Once that looks good, what we're going to do is we're going to add in some dynamic dip of the hips. Now, we've already mastered this position that we want to be in, the semi-squatted position. We want to make sure that we don't dip too low, because if we do, we're missing out on that optimal range that we need, that optimal muscle length that we need for optimal performance here in these plyometric actions. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start here in a straight position. We're going to start with the arms out in front of us. We're going to take a quick dip of the hips and explosively perform that box jump. Again, trying to master that landing like a statue and landing in that semi-squatted position. Trying to be as explosive as we can. Pop the hips as quickly as we can. Again, 3 to 4 weeks. Most likely we're going to perform about 5 repetitions. Now, we might skip this stage, or we might start right at this stage depending on the level of the athlete and the amount of time that we have to go through this progression. So after we've introduced these plyometric based exercises with these reduced eccentric loads, now we're going to increase the eccentric load. So we're going to jump from the ground and land on the ground, but we're going to make sure that, again, we're working on mastering our ability to take off and land efficiently. So we're going to stick this landing in between the jumps, again, somewhere between about 3 to 4 weeks, a normal phase of a training cycle. Semi-squatted position, arms in that takeoff position. We're going to scoop the arms, extend the hip, and then stick that landing. We're going to hold it for a second or two, make sure that posture and position is good, and stick the landing. After we've developed a good ability to deal with the forces, these increased eccentric forces that are going to occur as we land in between these hurdles, now we got to start adding a little bit of rhythm to these plyometric exercises. We have to work on our ability to interact quickly with the ground, but we're going to do so at reduced intensity. So for example, we're going to perform something that's going to be called a hurdle, hop, and bounce. Now again, if you have bigger hurdles, you are also more than welcome to use bigger hurdles as long as that's not impacting the amount of time you spend on the ground. So the second, for example, you perform this exercise and the ground contact time is increasingly long in that second jump that you're about to see, then the hurdles are too big, lower the height of the hurdle. But you're more than welcome to use bigger hurdles. These are just the hurdles that I have, so I don't have a choice. This is what we're using. So we're going to start in that semi-squatted position. We're going to scoop the arms, quick bounce in between the hurdles, and then we're going to get to the other side and stick that landing. We'll go the same thing going back. If you have 5 of these, line up 5 or 6 together and perform them straight in a row and stick just that last hurdle landing. So now, after we've gone through this 3 to 4 week phase where we've done some of this bouncing between these hurdles, now we're going to add some intensity to these exercises and do some more intensive plyometrics. We've gone through now, if we add up the weeks, about 3 months, 12 weeks worth of more extensive style plyometrics to build us to the point where we can start to do some more intense reacting off the ground. If you're a young athlete, you should absolutely go through the length of that progression, go through a lot of different jumping exercises similar to what we've done here, taking your time to build to these intensive plyometrics. It's important that you're doing plyometric work, but we have to master those fundamental landing and takeoff mechanics, get a good feeling for how to interact with the ground properly. Now, if you're an elite and more experienced athlete, we can minimize that process to some degree because we do want to get you to those intensive plyometrics. But especially if you're somebody that's playing year round and you're going through a preseason, we still want to get those extensive plyometrics in to make sure that we're properly preparing your tendons and your soft tissues for some of the intensive plyometric work we want to do towards the end of the preseason and especially as we go through that season. So don't ignore it. Don't think you're too good for it. Again, like I said, if you have bigger hurdles, you can perform these type of exercises with some larger hurdles. But once we're here, we're going to stick that last jump again, and we would line up 4 to 5 of these so we have a little bit more space and a little bit more equipment, and we're just going to react as quick as we can off the ground, try to get a little bit of height in this jump as well. Sticking that landing again, same idea. Quick contact with the ground is going to be the key. What you're going to notice is I do not drop into deep degrees of knee flexion. My legs are relatively straight and that power is coming from my hips and my ability to interact with the ground. So that was one of the ways that we like to progress our plyometrics. We go from eccentric, reduced jumping and landing mechanic-based exercises. Then we often advance to full eccentrically loaded but landing and jumping based exercises, that hurdle, hop, and stick. Then we develop into these hurdle and bounce type exercise where we learn to interact with the ground and coordinate with the ground in a quick manner but not intense manner. And then we build to those intensive plyometric versions that we had just seen where we're trying to react with the ground as quick as possible. Now, of course, you should add some variety into these, do some things in different directions. So for example, working not just forward and backwards, but also working laterally and medially. You should be doing some of this stuff on one leg. You could go through this exact same progression on one leg and performing some different types of bounding and hopping based exercises. So don't by any means think the example that we just gave to you here is the extent of the plyometrics that you should be performing. There's a lot of room for variety in different choice of exercise and a lot of scientific proof that that would actually make sense to try to perform some more variety in your plyometric exercises. But this is a good basis to show you how you should move from extensive to intensive plyometrics to develop explosive strength that's going to translate into improved athletic performance. So give that a try. If you have questions, let us know. Thank you guys for watching and make sure you follow and subscribe for more training content.